So today I thought I'd bring you a bit of an unplanned video. I wasn't sure whether I would make this video or should make this video, but ultimately I decided that it's going to benefit you guys for me to be open and honest about this. So let's get into it. So earlier this week I decided to start making some t-shirts for my husband because I wanted to do a tutorial on how to do a v-neck. Now, this is going to be part of my series at some point. Might wait till I've perfected the v-neck before I do bring you the actual tutorial, but I've spent the last 2 or 3 days, nearer 3 days than 2, filming the whole process for you, and in the end I just had to absolutely give up. It's not very often that I give up on a project. I haven't given up on a project in many years, maybe 3 or 4 years now. And the last time I gave up on a project was because I got bored of it. It seemed like a complete comedy of errors, if you're not me. If you were me, you were really frustrated. But I really think there's some takeaways for you guys here. So if you stay till the end of the video, I will give you those takeaways. As I said, I wanted to make some clothes for my husband. Well, actually, truth be told, I wanted to bring you the tutorial, and making a top for him was the quickest and easiest way to do it. In my mind, the t-shirt was going to take a couple of hours maximum, and I was wanting to bring a v-neck tutorial to the members of my channel, which would later on be part of the series that I'm running. All great plans in advance, but when does life ever work out the way you want it to? Just to give this a little bit of context, I am going through some health stuff. So I'm potentially quite serious health stuff, and that has impacted me. I've got a lot of brain fog, more than I normally would have, and my head has been all over the place. That has impacted things. So perhaps I would not have been so mistakey, if you like. Yeah, we'll call it mistakey. I wouldn't have been so mistakey if my head was feeling a bit straight. And I've left my machines out because this is hot off the press. I just decided yesterday that I was giving up, and I haven't put anything away yet. Got all my machines out, and I've got the tops to show you. So one thing on YouTube is people do, it's getting better, but in the main people do just tend to show their successes and not their failures. And I want to put my head above the parapet for this and say, you know, experienced seamstresses make mistakes too, and this is quite a big error. And I want you guys to know that if you're just starting out in sewing, or you are fairly new to sewing, that it is perfectly normal to make mistakes. And it's my aim by the end of this video that you're going to feel confident in your mistakes, and if you make a big mistake, it's not going to make you think, oh, sewing's not for me, I can't sew. It's going to make you think, another one bites the dust, let's try a different project, or we'll come back to that later, or many other things, but it won't make you give up. That is my aim for this video. Admitting where you went wrong isn't the easiest thing to do, let alone on YouTube. But I think it's really important, and I asked myself, who am I making videos for, myself or my audience? And it is my audience, so I really think this will benefit you. And so let's get into story time, shall we? I think there were 3 main things at fault here. One was my lack of experience in sewing v-necks. I very rarely do them. I think I did one make in the past, maybe 5 years ago, which was the Aberdeen by Seamwork, and because that was in more of a heavyweight knit fabric, it was a lot more forgiving, but it did come out perfectly fine the first time. The second issue was the fabric I used. I used cotton jersey because that's all I had available. My knit stash is really low right now, and by really low I mean I've got 1 piece left. So I do need to order more fabrics, but I wanted to use what I had, and in the first instance I had some scraps left over that were not big enough for me to make anything for myself, but they were big enough for making a top for my husband. So just to give you an idea of the fabric, I'm not going to show you the mistake till a bit later because I think that'll ruin it. But I did the baby blue front, I did a pink back, one blue sleeve and one pink sleeve. So I really was just using my scraps up. I thought it was a great way to use scraps up. This fabric wasn't cheap and it was a way to maximise the benefit I got from purchasing it. And then the second one I made was also in a cotton jersey, and that was this one. Now you might recognise this fabric, well, both of these fabrics. This was supposed to be part of my capsule wardrobe, but because I only had a few fabrics, I just used it for what I needed to use it for. So I will be ordering more, and it's a shame it didn't work out because I feel I've wasted the fabric in a way. Anyway, the third reason that I think I had issues was actually the pattern, because I downloaded a free pattern. It was the Friday Pattern Company men's raglan v-neck, and I cut it out and it looked to be a really good pattern actually, especially for being free. Two errors came up. One on the sleeve, which I will insert some footage now of what happened and how to fix it. As you can see here, the sleeve is not true, so I'm just folding it over an inch as I would when I was hemming it, and you can see that there is a little gap there. So what we're going to do is fix that. So we'll grab a piece of paper and sellotape that down. We can trim off the excess paper, fold it back, and then we're just going to trim the sides as they would be folded back, and then when we open it up we have a trued edge. So let me just trim this off and then I'll show you. So you can see we've got a little triangle there on the end, so that means that the pattern is trued. And the other issue came up with the actual size of the neckband. Now this is partially the fabric I used was not very stretchy, and probably the designer had a fabric with more stretch in mind when she designed it. Me being me, I didn't even look at the instructions, so my bad. So normally whenever I use a neckband I do draft it myself, and to do that I just measure the hole after I've put the shoulders together, take 10 to 15% off and cut my fabric from that. But for whatever reason, I decided this time, no, just go with the pattern. Pattern's drafted properly, go with that. So that's what I did, not giving any thought whatsoever to the stretch of the fabric. So anyway, I cut it all out. I cut the band out. These are such schoolgirl errors to make. I didn't measure it or anything, just went steam ahead. I attached the sleeves to the front and to the back because it's a raglan, and then I decided to work on the neck. Whenever you've got a unfinished hole for your neck, you always want to be finishing that as soon as possible in the process, just so it doesn't stretch out. So I just went full steam ahead, created my V and attached the V, because it's a really good idea when you are attaching a V to attach it at the point first with a basting stitch and then go in and do the whole thing. But then I attached the rest of the band, and I could see in the process of stretching it to meet the neckline that it was too small. But me being me, like, no, it will be absolutely fine. So I continue sewing, happy in my ignorance. And even as it is under the serger and I'm pulling it far too tight, and I'm thinking this is going to gather up, I still proceed and I still carry on. Have you ever been there where you just, as you're sewing, you know this is going wrong, but you continue to sew hoping for the best? Yeah, so that's what I did, and it come out and it was all gathered up, and I just thought, I can't use this. I decided to start unpicking it. I think I did a lightning stitch, and they're really hard to unpick. I did try and unpick it, then I gave up and just chopped the neckband off, and I attached it again. For whatever reason, I convinced myself it was too short. It wasn't too short, it was just that I hadn't distributed it properly. This is what I thought. And I don't know why I think this, because I can, like when I do a round neckband, I can do them with my eyes closed. I do have a video where I show you the process of how to do it. They come out perfectly. So why I thought that I wasn't distributing it, just distributing the ease properly, I will never know. But anyway, that's what my thought process was. Bear in mind, my brain fog is all over the show at this point. So I decided to attach another V. Did it. Wasn't overly perfect, but good enough to just proceed. So I attached the neckband, and it was the same size neckband, so nothing much changed. I distributed it a little differently. It was still really gathered, and I did use the serger this time. I just take more stupid and stupid steps the further into this process I go. Do not know where my head has been at. So at this point, I decided I was going to take it off and do it for a third time. So, third time lucky. No. First 2 times I'd done the neckband in blue, and then I decided to do this one in pink, just because I had no blue fabric left to do it. So I did that, and I made it a little bit bigger. I think I made it about 1 inch to 2 inches bigger. I forget now. It come out marginally better, but it was still very gathered, and the V was not very good either, which I think was because I serged it and didn't use the sewing machine. Here is you can see how gathered that is at the front, and the V does not look good at all. At this point, I just thought, I give up. I do not want to do this. So I came away from it for a little while because I was a little bit stressed. And I come up with the idea, let's start afresh. Because I was feeling like this fabric was all stretched out, and no matter how many times I did the V, it was not going to work. But I felt that if I did it on a fresh bit of fabric, that might help. So that's when I started using this fabric. So I cut it out, and this time I actually cut out a neckband that was quite a bit bigger. But I measured the neckband and it was 20 inches and my hole was like 28, 29 inches. So that it should only be 10 to 15% difference. So that is far too small. So I added a substantial amount, maybe 3 or 4 inches, and it still wasn't enough. Now I think that is down to the fabric, because the fabric doesn't have much give at all, and I think that was my problem at this point. I should have used a more flowy, more drapey fabric. So anyway, I cut it quite a few inches bigger, attached it. Well, what I did is I attached the V part, and then I sort of put the rest of the neckband round the neck, and I could see it was still too short. So I unpicked the V. Not too much of a disaster there, because I'd only sewn the V, which was easy to unpick because it was done with a basting stitch, which is when you use number 5 stitch length on your sewing machine. Which I would advise do this for the whole of the neckband if you're going to make a V-neck. I recut a bigger piece. The good thing with this fabric was I had plenty of it to play around with. So I cut another neckband, and this time I made it super, super big. Or not big, wide. And then I put it around the neck. Before I did the V, before I did anything, I just crossed the fabrics over to create that V, put a pin in it, and then put the fabric all the way around the neck hole to see if it would fit, and it didn't. It was still too small. So I recut it again. I remeasured the hole because I was doing a new top, and I also went down a size. My husband had tried on the first top and he said it was too baggy for his liking. So the next one I sized down. So the hole was a little bit smaller, and I think it was 26 or 27 inches, I forget now. And I cut a band that worked at 25 inches. So that's how little stretch my fabric had. I attached the V, and I then went round and put the rest of the neckband in, sewed it in. And why, after all of this, I did not use the basting stitch, I don't know. But I decided I was going to serge it. You know what? The actual neckband, not the V-neck, but the rest of it, come out not too bad, except I had a massive tuck in it. Even the v-neck wasn't too bad. It wasn't perfect, but it was passable, especially as my husband's wearing it and his standards are really, really low. Like, even with this one, I knew if I let him wear it like this, it's just going to bother me so much. So I will at some point unpick this again and try and redo it again, but we'll give myself some time before we go there. So getting back to the other one, I serged it and the actual neckband come out fine. But as I say, I had this big tuck, and even though it was in the back and no one would see it, I just thought my OCD was not letting me have this. It really wasn't. So I started to unpick it, and then I gave up unpicking and just chopped the whole thing off. And because you're only losing like 3/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch when you chop that off, because you're just chopping right at the seam line. So I did that, and then I reattached it again. The V wasn't too bad. I attached it, the neck went on fine, and then I realised my error. Well, let me show you. When I realised this error, I could have cried. I was like day 3 now, and I was ready for this to be finished. So this is my top in the right way. Do you notice anything wrong with that? Yes, my neckband is on back to front. So let's turn it in the other way. Bear in mind this has not been ironed, but so I've got all my seams to side seams and raglan seams there, but there's the neckband. And as you can see, I hope you can see that there, it has got a little bit of a tuck. Not a tuck, but like, it hasn't been ironed yet, but, and I think once he's wearing it, probably won't be noticeable. But the side seams will be, won't they? Let's face it. At that point, I just said, no, I can't continue with this. Have you ever been there? I'm sure you have. I just had to walk away from it at that point. I had a lot going on in my head, and I just did not have capacity to persevere, because I'd already cut this neckband off once, and it's just, I can't keep cutting it because the hole's getting bigger and bigger. So I just told him this will have to be PJs. In the winter this would be great because it's a really thick fabric, and I'll make him another one when I've got over my fiasco. Let me give you some takeaways. So first things first, if you're going to do a v-neck or any neckband really, make sure you baste it first. Baste. I cannot swear. I cannot do that. I cannot explain that enough. At the very least, when you cut out your pattern, make sure that you do measure your neckband. Even if you really respect the pattern designer, because I really respect Friday Pattern Company, and I do think ultimately it was my mistake rather than theirs. I do think their neck piece is a little bit on the small side, even for a stretchier fabric. But by the by, whoever's fault it is, check it, because it's your fabric that's going to get wasted. I would go as far as to say to learn to draft your own neckband piece, because I always have the most success when I do that, and there will be a video coming up in my series about that. If you are not that au fait with what you're doing, such as a v-neck, then do practice on a scrap piece of fabric first, which is something I should have done, because like I say, I have done v-necks but not for a long time. I am not giving up. I'm definitely going to bring you a v-neck tutorial. I'm just going to work on it a little bit before I do. Another takeaway that's really helped me actually was using a stitch guide. A stitch guide is just where you sew a basting stitch at the seam allowance that you want to use. So I did a basting stitch on the point of the V on both the actual neckband piece and the top, and that helped me to align it up. Lastly, you just want to be careful of the fabric you use. Now, in theory, cotton jersey should be absolutely fine to use for this, but I think it was a little bit on the thick side, really, and it didn't have a lot of give. So they were my takeaways. I hope they helped you. I hope you found the video funny, informative, and really gave you a bit of confidence, all the things. And if you did, leave me a comment in the compliment box down below. If you haven't already, do check out my video from last week where I talked about how to choose a sewing machine. Even if you're not in the market for a sewing machine right now, or you're happy with your machine, do check the video out, because there are takeaways within that video that could be beneficial to you. Until next time, happy sewing. Bye for now. Do you love your mum? Suckerick. You love mommy?